Hey guys, I'm a little early. I was trying to play with something.
Hey guys, I'm a little early.
I was trying to see how my audio would work with that music in the background. What's up, guys? Story time. Let's see. Hi, Kirk. Hi, Nita. Hi, Dory. Oh, Julie Van D. Hi, Nita. Hi, Thomas. Spirit Box World and Card Readings. Kirk. I think I said everybody. She did the switch over. So I'm over here. Got my scent of Salem candle. Can y'all see that? This does smell so good, guys. Oh my God. I've never been to Salem, but if that's the way Salem smells, I want to go. I'm not like advertising really for them. I don't know them personally. I just love that candle. I'm going to put a link in here if y'all want to check that out. It's a good candle. It smells so good. I don't know. Does Salem smell like? I don't know if Salem does or not. Y'all would have to tell me if anybody's been to Salem. I'd love to go to Salem one day. How's everybody doing? I'm like looking at my phone down here so I can read your comments. Y'all been having a good week? Story time coming up. So what did y'all think about my videos I've posted at the dam? Did y'all like those? We had a great time. Very, very hot. They said you could wear a mask if you want to. I know a lot of people in the comments are like, "Oh my God, wear the mask." But oh, okay, Kirk. But the reason that's y'all, if we had wore masks, we would have probably passed out dead. Y'all just can't imagine how hot it was there in that building. It was miserably hot. We were all soaking wet. Our hair was soaking wet, and we were there from 6 to midnight, and then 1 to 3 a.m. for the ghost hunt. And yeah, it was hot the whole time. We all laughed about the fact that we had all took showers and looked nice to go down there, and then was going to have to go home and take showers again to clean up because we were soaking with sweat. I'm glad y'all liked the videos. I do have a lot of things that, yes, I'm glad I went. Appreciate that, Kirk. It's very, very hot here today in Alabama. But we had a blast. Hi, Helen. How are you? Um, I do have a lot of things I cut out. Like I recorded a really good bit of that spirit box session with Franco. And there was some other things that I did not post, and I'm thinking about saving all that for my Patreons and channel members. So if you are a Patreon or channel member, then you'll probably get to see some of that uncut stuff, some of that raw footage if you'd like. See what you think about it, just something a little extra. I didn't make it, I don't want to make the videos too long because lots of walking. My statistics show me that not everybody's watching the whole entire video. 90% of the time, about 7 to 8 minutes of a video is watched, and on some videos maybe about 10. So there's most of the people don't watch all the way to the end. So that's a lot of work to put into a 20 or 30-minute video. So I've been cutting down on what I put in and just saving the rest for the Patreons. But that's what I think I'm going to continue to do. Kyle's home today. I asked him to come say hi, but I think he's eating right now. He's looking at me from his bedroom. He's eating. He's like, I don't want to be bothered right now. He's eating and playing a video game. So he's got priorities going on. So how many we got? We got 9 people in here. The end is where the best stuff is. Thanks, Kirk. Usually the end is where, like what I try to do is start with a story and build up to the end and have the end be like you said where the good stuff is, but not everybody does that. So I've got a new little background for y'all. I'll switch back and forth from the little fireplace to this, but I just thought it might be something interesting. I do have a movie coming Saturday for those of you that come in on the Saturday night movies. I tried to upload one last night, and YouTube wouldn't let me show it. So I've got another one. I'm going to upload it tonight and see how that one does. I have to try to upload them at night because it takes so long to render to YouTube. And I just do it at night and then see how it looks the next morning. So I'm going to do that. So, yay, movie night's back this Saturday. So I got out the same book that we read last week. And when I read these to y'all, I'm going to be hearing them for the first time myself. Because, I don't know, I told Casa I need to read them ahead of time so that way I'll know how to do them. You'll come in and say hi. He's being shy. Come in and say hi to everybody.
Hi.
I don't know if you can call. Isn't he cute, ladies? He's my oldest. And Copper wants to be in the picture. I don't know if we can show him or not. Oh, God, he jumped. Oh, here comes Shorty. Those 2 dogs are so jealous, you guys. One more love. Oh, wow. Okay. Are y'all ready for story time? I don't know if I'm going to do the spirit box thing today or not. Oh, thank you. I might do a different live stream outside. No, it probably won't be today, but maybe this weekend. Maybe it'll be cooler this weekend, and I can do an actual good one outside. So we'll see how that goes. Helen Davison from the UK says hi, Kyle. He says hi. Oh, wow. Okay, guys. I'm going to sip me a little more tea and we'll get started on this live stream with some ghost stories. Let's see. Okay, let me make sure. I'm going to look at my phone. Ah, shoot. You can still see me. I messed up. Meant to go full screen on y'all. Let me see if that worked. Ah, I think it might have. I forget week to week. Hi, Sherry. How are you, girl? I'm going to sip me some tea and get ready to get started. Okay, let's see. Get my eyeballs on. Okay, guys, this one is called The Telephone by Mary Treadgold. If you would catch the spleen and laugh yourself into stitches, follow me. I called to Sir Toby, and as I ran across the stage, caught the eye of the white-haired man. in the VIP's row. The light from the stage streamed out over the darkened theater. He was leaning forward, amused, laughing, and as Sir Toby chased after me, I laughed back. I had fallen in love with him at sight, there from the middle of the stage, at an end of term dramatic school performance at Twelfth Night. We met at the party after the show, and met again and again, and then we began to meet in the backstreet Soho restaurants, and then in my tiny London flat. I loved him desperately. I had never been in love before, and Alan had not been in love for over 30 years. Not since he had married Catherine, he told me, in some quiet little snowbound Canadian township. I never meant this to happen. I never felt like this about any woman before. I don't understand myself, he said restlessly. Hello, Mary Specht. How are you doing today? All through that winter, I clung to Alan. We kept the long, secret winter afternoons and evenings together. There was so much that he wanted to give me, the things that I wanted for myself, more than wanted, believed that I must have. I want to give you kindness and shelter and love, he said. He and Catherine had no children. But it could not go on like that. Every time he came to my flat, the conflict in him deepened. It was like the deepening rift splintering the tree trunk down to its roots. He would turn wearily towards me. How can I hurt her? He would ask me. Catherine and we've been together all these years, long before you were even born. Why, I knew her when she was a schoolgirl, a child. Look at what we've done together. Look at our work. I tried to understand, but I seemed to see only a gray, ghostly marriage, a kind of deadly, intellectual, middle aged companionship stretched back down the years. There was nothing there, I thought, that should be preserved. It would be so different for us, I thought, and I clung the more desperately. I cannot live without you, I said, believing I could not. Our dilemma, Alan's agony, was resolved by Catherine finding out. There was no drama, no scenes. During the next few months, I never knew what passed between them. I dared not ask. I felt like a child whose parents are gravely discussing in the next room portents beyond its comprehension. But presently Catherine went unobtrusively back to Canada without Alan. Alan shut up the house in Hampstead and talked out of selling it. Neither one of us wanted to live there. Immediately after our marriage, we came up to this cottage in the Western Highlands, which we rented through an advertisement in the Times. That year, Scotland had one of its rare perfect summers. We bathed and fished, and the long halcyon days passed over us with scarcely a break in the weather. I was blissfully happy, free from the conflicts and indecisions of the past months. We turned again to each other, discovering new releases, new and deepening absorption. Our cottage lay by the shore and a curve of the hills. Whenever I remembered that summer, it seems as if the falling tides of the Atlantic were always in our ears, and as if the white sands were always warm under our bare feet. But again, it could not last. One scorching day in early September, I came round the cottage at lunchtime, carrying a pot roast over to the table under our rowan tree. I found Alan sitting, staring down at an open airmail letter that the postman had just delivered. He looked up, and as I put the pot roast down, his face was dazed, his hands were shaking. Catherine is dead, he said incredulously. Dead. This letter's from her sister in Toronto. She says, and he stared again at the letter as though it were lying words. She says heart failure. Very peacefully, she says. His eyes went past mine to the open sea. Then he got up and went to the house while I stayed, pleating the gingham cloth between my fingers. Once more I felt like the child who had inadvertently witnessed a parent's distress. Shocked, yes, but horribly embarrassed. Then I followed Alan to the cottage, and I put my arms around him. All that day I watched over him in my heart as he moved about the place. But we did not mention Catherine, nor the next day, and although I waited for Alan to speak, her name never passed our lips during the next 3 weeks. 3 weeks later to the day, among other letters forwarded from London by the post office, arrived the telephone bill for the Hampstead house, the second demand. We had forgotten about the first. Damn, said Alan. We were once again eating our lunch in the garden. Damn, I ought to have had the thing disconnected before we ever left London. I picked up the envelope and looked at the date of the forwarding. They'll probably have cut you off by themselves by now, I said. But Alan was already crossing the grass to collect the pudding from the kitchen oven. Go in by the hall, I called after him. You can find out if it's still connected by ringing the number. If you hear it ringing away at the London end, you'll know it's still on. And I lay back in my desk chair, staring up at the scarlet rowan berries against the sky and thinking that Alan was beginning to hump his shoulders like an old man, and that his skin looked somehow as if the sea salt were drying it out. Well, I said, still connected? Perhaps I invented the slight pause before Alan carefully set down the apple pie and replied, Yes, still connected. That evening I went up to the bed alone because Alan said he wanted to trim the lamps in the kitchen. I was sitting in the window in the late Highland dusk, brushing my hair and looking out over the sea, when I heard a light tinkle in the hall below. I turned my head, but the house lay silent. I went over to the door. Hampstead, 96843. Alan's voice, low, strained, came up the stairs. Excuse me. There was a long silence, and then my heart turned over, for I heard his voice again whispering, Oh, my dear, my dear. But the words broke off, and from the dark well of the hall came a low sob. I suppose I moved, and the floorboard creaked, because I heard the receiver lay down, and I saw Alan's shadow move heavily across the wall at the foot of the stairs. We lay side by side that night and never spoke, but I know that it was daybreak before Alan slept. During the next few days, I became terribly afraid. I began to watch over Alan with new eyes, those of a mother. For the first time, I knew a quite different tenderness, one that nearly choked me with its burden of grief and fear for him as he moved above the cottage like a sleepwalker, trying pathetically to keep up appearances before me, his face, as it seemed, aging hourly in its weariness. I became frightened too for myself. I kept telling myself that nothing had happened. But in the daytime, I avoided looking at the dead black telephone inert on its old fashioned stand in the hall. At night, I lay awake, trying not to picture that telephone wire running tautly underground away from our cottage, running steadily south, straight down through the border hills, down through England. During that week, I tried never to leave Alan's side, but once I had got off unexpectedly to the village shop. When I returned, I had to pretend that I hadn't seen him through the half open door, gently laying down the receiver. And twice more in the evening, there must have been other times, when I was cooking our supper, he slipped out of the kitchen, and I heard the faint, solitary tinkle in the hall. I could have rung up the telephone people and begged them to cut off the Hampstead number. But with what excuse? I could have taken pliers and wrenched our own telephone out of its socket. I knew that nothing would be solved with pliers. But by the weekend, I did not know what I could do for sanity's sake to prevent us from going down into the solitudes of our guilt. On Friday afternoon, after tea, my opportunity came. It was a glorious evening, golden with the sand blowing lightly along the shore and a racing tide. I persuaded Alan to take the boat out to troll for mackerel on the turn. I watched him go off from the doorway. I waited until I actually saw him push the boat off from our small jetty. Then I turned back to the cottage and closed the door behind me. I had shut out all the evening sunlight so that I could hardly see the telephone, but I walked over to it. I took it up in both my hands. I drew a long, deep breath and gave the Hampstead number. All that I had been told of Catherine during those bad months in London had been of kindness and gentleness and goodness, nothing of revenge. To this I clung, and upon it I was banking. My teeth were chattering, and I was shaking all over when the bell in London began to ring. I suppose at the moment I lost my head. I thought I could have sworn I heard the receiver softly raised at the far end, but I suppose I should have waited instead of bursting into words. Now, I shall never know. And they were not even words I'd planned. I suppose I reverted, being so frightened, to the kind of prayer one blurts out in childhood. Please, please, I said down the mouthpiece. Please let me have him now. I know everything I've done's been wrong. It's too late about that, but I won't be a child any more. I'll look after him like you've always done, I said. Oh, please let me have him now. I'll be a wife to him. I promise you, if that's what you're wanting. I can get him right again, and I'll take care of him, now and forevermore, I said, and I banged the receiver down and fled upstairs to our bedroom. Through the windows I could see the little boat bobbing about in the sea. I sat down in the window in the full evening sun and shook all over and cried and cried. In the small hours of the morning came the crisis. I woke. It must have been about 4:30. The bed was empty. In an instant I was wide awake, because down in the hall I could hear the insistent tinkle of the telephone receiver, struck over and over again, and above it, mingled with it, Alan's voice. Somehow I got the lamp lighted. The shadows tilted all over the ceiling, and I could hear the paraffin sloshing around the bowl as I stumbled out into the head of the stairs. Catherine! Catherine! He was shaking the receiver and babbling down the mouthpiece when my light from the staircase fell upon him. He let the receiver drop and stood looking up at me. I can't get her, he said. I wanted her to forgive me, but she doesn't answer. I can't reach her. I brought him up the stairs. I can remember shivering with the little dawn sea wind blowing through my cotton nightdress from the open window. I made him tea while he sat in the window staring up at the gray clouds of the morning. He at last said, You must book yourself a room at one of the hotels in Oban. Only for a couple of nights. I'll come back, probably tomorrow or the next day. You see, he began to explain carefully, politely, as if to a foreigner. You see, I've got to find Catherine, and so I have to go down unexpectedly to London. From our remote part of the Highlands, there are only 2 trains a day. Alan went on the early morning one. I had, of course, no intention of going to any hotel. I knew where my promise to Catherine lay, where lay my love. I said yes to everything Alan said and stayed in the cottage all that day, and then I caught the evening train. There was no chance of a sleeper. I huddled in the corner of a carriage packed with returning holiday makers. My face turned first to the twilight and then to the darkness rushing past the window. In the dead cold hours when the other passengers sprawled and snored, the terror for Alan nearly throttled me. Once I dozed off and woke, biting back my scream because I thought I saw the telephone wire running alongside the train, stretched and singing, You'll never know, you'll never know. Euston in the morning loomed, gaunt and monstrous. The London streets were dripping with autumn rain. What happened? It stopped on me. Sorry about that. I told the taximan to drive as fast as possible up to Hampstead. When he pulled up in Allen's Road before a gate set high in a wall, I was already half out of the taxi. I pushed the fare at him, slapped open the gate, and ran up the short drive. I had just time to notice that the white Regency house was more or less what I had pictured. before I was up the flight of steps and tugging at the iron bed pull. I was tired, and deadly afraid. What courage I had ever had seemed to have fled. I promise, I promise. Oh, if you ever really been there, please have gone, I gabbled, while the London rain poured over me and the bell reverberated through the house. At last I heard movement inside the house and then footsteps slowly drawing towards the door. For a second, Al and I stood gazing at each other. Then suddenly, I was over the threshold and in his arms. While the door swung gently to behind us, I drew him over to the staircase, drew him down, beside him as he sat there on the second stair. He turned his face against my shoulder and heaved a sigh. After a while, I raised my head and looked about me. We were in a large white paneled hall with a window through which I could see the pine tree, its quiet branches stroking the glass. The only thing in common with our hall up in Scotland was the telephone, standing on a mahogany table against the wall. For some moments I gazed at it. My terror was wholly gone, like a dream of morning. But I became aware of a new emotion, disquieting, faintly discernible. I looked suspiciously down at Alan. I wanted to know. Cautiously, I began to frame my question. He was so still that I wondered if he'd fallen asleep. But just then he stirred, and I took his head between my hands, and as he smiled at me, turned his face searchingly toward the light. It was calm as though washed by the tidal waters. I knew that I could never ask my question. At that moment, the front door began to peal. We both jumped and got to our feet. You go, said Alan, disappearing into the back of the house. The sharp-nosed man in the dripping mackintosh was aggrieved. Been sent to cut you off, he said. Bill unpaid, nothing done. I turned back into the hall. About me, above me, the house lay quiet. Only against the window, the boughs of the plane tree clamored in a sudden fury of wind and rain. The question I could never ask, the answer never to be given. Surely both were irrelevant. For all the tranquillity of the house, I felt my panic begin again to stir. There was only one thing that mattered to me, to us. Alan, I called. I try not to let my voice quiver. It's about the telephone. Do you want it cut off? I held my breath. The reply came immediately. Why, darling, if we're going back to Scotland tonight, out of this damnable climate, we won't want to pay for what we aren't going to need anymore. Tell them they can disconnect it at once. That's a pretty sad story, isn't it? Poor Catherine. Mm-mm-mm. Does anybody know what a drog is? Draug. That's going to be our next story. Elias and the Drog. Now, people from the UK will have to forgive me because I cannot pronounce this. Hey, Jenny, how are you? On Cavalam, this little town that I can't pronounce, down in Helgeland, there was lived a poor fisherman by the name of Elias and his wife Karen, who before marriage had worked at the parsonage at Alstadhock. They lived in a little hut which they had built, and Elias hired out by the day in the Lofoten fisheries. It was a lonely island, and there were signs at times that it was haunted. Ooh, sounds cool, Helen. Sometimes when her husband went away from home, the good wife heard all sorts of unearthly noises and cries, which surely boded no good. Each year there came a child. When they had been married 7 years, there were 6 children in the home. But they were both steady and hard-working people, and by the time the last arrived, Elias had managed to put aside something and felt that he could afford a sixern and therefore do his Lofoten fishing as master in his own boat. One day, as he was walking with a halibut harpoon in one hand, thinking about this, he suddenly came upon a huge seal, sunning itself in the lee of a rock near the shore, and apparently quite as much taken by surprise as he was. Elias, meanwhile, was not slow. From the rocky ledge on which he was standing, he plunged the long, heavy harpoon into its back just behind the neck. But then, oh, what a struggle! Instantly, the seal reared itself up, stood erect on its tail, tall as the mast of a boat, and glowered at him with a pair of bloodshot eyes, at the same time showing its teeth in a grin so fiendish and venomous that Elias almost lost his wits from fright. Then suddenly it plunged into the sea and vanished in a spray of mingled blood and water. That was the last Elias saw of it, but the very afternoon the harpoon broken just below the iron bog came drifting ashore near the boat, landing not far from his house. Elias had soon forgotten all about it. He bought a cistern that same autumn and housed it in a little boat shed he had built during the summer. One night, as he lay thinking about his new cistern, it occurred to him that perhaps in order to safeguard it properly, he ought to put another shore on either side underneath it. He was so absurdly fond of the boat that he thought it only fun to get up and light his lantern and go down to look it over. As he held up his lantern to see better, he suddenly glimpsed on a tangle of nets in one corner a face that resembled exactly the features of the seal. It grimaced for a moment angrily towards him in the light. Its mouth seemed to open wider and wider, and before he was aware of anything further, he saw a bulky man of form vanish out of the door of the boathouse. Not so fast, however, but that he managed to make out, with the aid of his lantern, a long iron prong projecting from its back. Elias now began to put two and two together, but even so he was more concerned for the safety of his boat than he was for his own life. On the morning, early in January, when he set out for the fishing banks with two men from the boat besides himself, he heard a voice call to him from the darkness from a scurry directly opposite the mouth of the cove. He thought that it laughed derisively. "Better beware, Elias, when you get to Fimboring." And it says below, Fimboring is the famous Nordland fishing boat whose form has been perfected by centuries of experimenting. Learned something new today. It was a long time, however, before Elias saw his way clear to get a Fimboring. Not until his eldest son was 17 years old. It was in the fall of the year that Elias embarked with his whole family and went to Ronan to trade in his cistern for a Fimboring. At home they left only a little Lap girl, but newly confirmed, whom they had taken into their home some years before. There was one Fimboring in particular, which he had his eye on, a four-man boat, which the best shipwright thereabout had finished and tarred that very fall. For this boat he traded his own cistern, paying the difference in coin. Elias thereupon began to think of sailing home. He first stopped at the village store and laid in a supply for Christmas for himself and his family, among other things a little keg of brandy. It may be that, pleased as it were with the day's bargaining, both he and his wife had one drop too many before they left, and Burnt, their son, was given a taste too. That sounds good, Sherry. Whereupon they set sail for home in the new Fimboring. Other ballast than himself, his wife and children, his Christmas supplies he had none. His son Burnt sat down at the stem. His wife, with the assistance of the second son, managed the halyard. Elias himself sat at the tiller, while the two younger sons, 12 and 14 respectively, were to alternate at the bailing. They had 50 odd miles of sea before them, and they had no sooner reached the open than it was apparent that the Fimboring would be put to the test the very first time it was in use. A storm blew up before long, and soon white crested waves began dashing themselves into spray. Then I saw what kind of a boat he had. It rode the waves like a seagull, without so much as taking in one single drop, and he was ready to swear that he would never even have to single reef, as an ordinary Fimboring would have been compelled to do in such weather. As the day drew on, he noticed not far away another Fimboring, completely manned, speeding along, just as he was then, with 4 reefs in the sail. It seemed to follow the same course, and he thought it strange that he had not noticed it before. It seemed to want to race with him. And when Elias realized this, he could not resist letting out a reef again. So they raced along at terrific speed past the headlands and islands and scurries. To Elias it seemed he had never before sailed so gloriously, where the Fimboring proved to be every whit that he had claimed, the best boat and reigning. Meanwhile the sea had risen, and already several huge waves had rolled after them, breaking against the stem up forward where the Burnt had sat, and sweeping out to leeward near the stern. Ever since dust had settled over the sea, the other boat had kept very close to them, and they were now so near each other that they could have thrown a bailing dipper one to the other had they wished. And so they sailed on, side by side, all the evening, in an ever increasing sea. The last reef, Elias began to think, ought really to be taken in again, but he was too loath to give up the race, and made up his mind to wait as long as possible, until the other boat saw fit to reef in, for it was quite as hard pressed as he. And since they now had to fight both the cold and the wet, the brandy bottle was now and then brought forth and passed around. The phosphorescent light, which played in the dark sea near his own boat, flashed eerily in the white crest around the stranger, which appeared to be ploughing a furrow of light, and throwing a fiery foam to either side. In the reflection of this light, he could even distinguish the rope ends in the other boat. He could also make out the crew on board in their oilskin caps, but inasmuch as they were on the leeward side of him, they kept their backs turned and were almost hid behind the lofty gunwale as it rose with the seas. Of a sudden, gigantic breaker, whose white crest Elias had for some time seen in the darkness, crashed against the prow of the boat where Bert sat. For a moment the whole Fimboring seemed to come to a stop. The timbers creaked and jarred under the strain, and then the boat, which for half a second had balanced uncertainly, righted itself and sped forward, while the wave rolled out again to leeward. All the while this was happening, Elias thought he heard fiendish cries issuing from the other boat. But when it was over, his wife, who had sat in the halyard, cried out in a voice that cut him to the very soul. "My God, Elias, the sea took Martha and Nils." They were her 2 youngest children, the former 9, the latter 7 years old, who had been sitting forward close to Burnt. "Hold fast to the halyard, Kieran, or you may lose more," was all Elias answered. It was necessary now to take in the 4th reef, and Elias had no sooner done that than he thought it advisable to reef in the 5th, for the sea was steadily rising. On the other hand, if he hoped to sail his boat clear of the ever-mounting waves, he dared not lessen his sail more than was absolutely necessary. It turned out, however, to be difficult going, even with the sail thus diminished. The sea raged furiously, and deluged them in spray after spray. Finally, Burnt and Anton. Oh, shoot, sorry. I forgot that quick. Um, the next oldest, who had helped his mother, finally at the halyard, and had take hold of the yardarm, something one resorts to only when a boat is hard pressed even with the last reefed in case the fifth. The rival boat, which in the meantime had disappeared from sight, bobbed up alongside them with exactly the same amount of sail that he was carrying. Elias now began rather to dislike the crew over there, the two men who stood holding the yardarm and whose faces he could glimpse underneath the oilskin caps appeared to him in the weird reflections from the spray more like specters than human beings. They spoke ne'er a word. Yes, Julie Van D in the house. She was in here under shoot. Dory's name first, I believe. Yes. Getting all of our peeps in the house. Now I lost my place. A little to the leeward, he spotted the foaming ridge of another breaker rising before him in the dark, and he prepared himself to meet it. He turned the prow slantwise towards it, and let out as much sail as he dared to give the boat speed enough to cleave its way through. The sea struck them with the roar of a torrent. For a moment the boat again careened uncertainly. When it was all over, the vessel had righted itself once more. His wife no longer sat in the halyard, nor was Anton in the yardarm. They had both been washed to sea. This time, too, he thought he made out for some fiendish voices above the storm, but mingled with them. He also heard his wife's agonizing cries as she called him by name. When he realized that she had been swept overboard, he muttered to himself, "In Jesus' name," and said no more. He felt vaguely that he would have preferred to follow her, but he realized at the same time that it was up to him to save the other three on board, Burnt and the two younger sons, one 12, the other 14, who for a while had been doing the bailing, but whom had later placed in the stern behind him. Burnt was now left to manage the yardarm alone, and the two, father and son, had to help each other as best they could. The tiller Elias did not dare go. He held on to it with hand of iron, long since numb from the strain. After a while the companion boat bobbed up again, as before it had been momentarily lost to view. He now saw more clearly than before that the bulky form that sat aft, much as he was sitting and controlling the tiller, projecting from his neck whenever he turned his back just below the old skin cap, Elias could clearly discern some 4 inches or so of an iron prong which he had seen before. At that he was convinced in his uttermost soul of two things. One, that it was none other than the Drog himself, who sat steering his half boat alongside his, and who had lured him on to destruction, and the other that he was fated, no doubt, this night to sail the sea for the last time. For he who sees the Drog at sea is a marked man. Hi, Brittany. Welcome to the live stream, sister. Welcome, welcome. He said nothing to the others, in order not to discourage them, but he commended his soul in silence to the Lord. He had found it necessary during the last hours to bear away from his course because of the storm. And when furthermore it took to snowing heavily, he realized that he would no doubt have to postpone any attempt to land until dawn. Meanwhile, they sailed on as before. Now and again the boys aft complained of freezing, but there was nothing to do about that, wet as they were, and furthermore Elias had preoccupied with his own thoughts. Oh, really? That's cool, Thomas. Your dad's a really great guy, Brittany. And it says here what the Drog is. The Drog, it says, is a sea monster who sails a half boat with a crew of men lost at sea who have not received a Christian burial. He who sees the Drog, according to Norland Superstition soon will die. So it's definitely not looking good for Elias and the rest of the family. He had been seized with an insatiable desire to avenge himself. What he would have liked to do, had he not the lives of three remaining children to safeguard, was suddenly to veer about in an attempt to ram and sink the cursed boat, which still, as if to mock him rather than alongside him, and whose fiendish purpose he now fully comprehended. If the halibut harpoon had taken effect, why might not a knife or a gaff do otherwise? Likewise, he felt he would willingly give his life to deal one good blow to this monster who had so unmercifully robbed him of all that was dearest to him on earth, and who still seemed insatiate and demanding more. About 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, they again spied rolling towards them in the darkness the white crest of a wave, so huge that Elias for a moment surely thought they were just offshore somewhere in the neighborhood of breakers. It was not long, however, before he understood that it was really only a colossal wave. Then he thought he clearly heard someone laugh and cry out in the other boat, "There goes your boring, Elias!" Elias, who foresaw the catastrophe, repeated loudly, "In Jesus' name," commanded his sons to hold fast, and told them if the boat went down to grasp the osier band and the oarlocks, and not to let go till it had come afloat again. He let the elder of the two boys go forward. To Burnt the younger he kept close to himself, caressing his cheeks furtively once or twice, and assuring himself that the child had a tight hold. The boat was literally buried beneath the towering comber, and was just pitched up on end, its stem high above the wave, before it finally went under. When it came afloat again, its keel now in the air, Elias Burnt and the 12-year-old Martin appeared too, still clinging to the osier bands, but the third of the brothers had disappeared. It was a matter of not life or death now. First of all, to get the rigging cut away on one side that they might be rid of the mast, which would otherwise rock the boat from beneath, and then to crawl up onto the hull and let the imprisoned air out, which would otherwise have kept the boat too high afloat and prevented its riding the waves safely. After considerable difficulty, they succeeded in doing, and Elias, who had been the first to clamber up, assisted the other two to safety. I imagine this little man that you're looking at. Oh, you talking about the drog? He sounds like a Grim Reaper. I didn't know if you were talking about him or this creepy little guy holding a pumpkin walking around in the in the background. Maybe he's the drog. We might start calling him the drog man. Thus they sat the long winter night through, desperately clinging and cramped hands and numb knees to the hull, as one wave after another swept over them. After a few hours, Martin, whom the father had supported all this time as best he could, died of exhaustion and slipped into the sea. They had several times attempted to call for help, but realizing that it was to no avail, they finally gave it up. Oh no, is it a woman? It looks like an ugly old man with a scarf. I'm not sure what he is. Hoo hoo hoo. As the two, thus left alone, sat on the hull of the boat, Elias told Burnt he knew that he himself was fated soon to follow mother, but he had a firm hope that Burnt would be saved in the end, if only he stuck it out like a man. And then he told him all along about the drog, how he had wounded him in the neck with a halibut harpoon, and how the drog was now taking his revenge and would surely not give up until they were quits. It was towards 9 o'clock in the morning before the day finally began to dawn. Elias had handed over to Burnt, who sat at his side, his silver watch with the brass chain which he had broken in pulling it out from underneath his close-buttoned vest. He sat a while longer, but as it grew lighter, Burnt saw that his father's face was ghastly pale. The hair on his head was parted in several places, as it often does just before death, and the skin on his hands was worn off from efforts to hang on to the keel. Burnt realized that his father was near the end. He tried, as well as the pitching of the boat permitted, to edge over him and support him. But when Elias noticed it, he waved him back. You stay where you are, Burnt, and hold fast. I'm going to Mother in Jesus' name. And so saying, he threw himself backward down from the hull. When the sea had gone, it quieted down for a while. And as everyone knows who has straddled a hull, it became easier for Burnt to maintain his hold. With the coming of daylight, new hope kindled in on him. The storm moderated. In the full light of day, he thought he recognized his surroundings, that he was, in fact, drifting directly off the shore from his own home. He began crying for help again, but he really had greater faith in a tide new landward just beyond a projection of the island which checked the fury of the sea. He drifted nearer and nearer shore and finally came so close to one of the skerries that the mast, which still floated alongside the boat, grated on the rocks with the rising and falling of the surf. Stiff as his muscles and joints were from his sitting so long and holding fast to the hull, he managed with great effort to transfer himself to the scurry, after which he hauled in the mast and finally moored the finboarding. The little Lapp girl, who was home alone for 2 whole hours, thought she heard cries for help, and when they persisted, she mounted the hilltop to look out to sea. There she saw Burnt on the skerry and the upturned finboarding beating up and down against it. She ran instantly down to the boathouse, pushed out the old rowboat, and rowed it out to the skerry, hugging the shore ground of the island. Burnt lay still under her care the whole winter long and did not take part in the fishing that year. People used to say that ever after he seemed now and again a little queer. To sea he would never go again. He had come to fear it. He married the Lapp girl and moved up to Malingen, where he broke new ground and cleared himself a home. There he is still living and doing well. So, fear the drog. Fear the man woman on your screen. Is she a witch? Is she a warlock? We don't know what it is. It's just scary. That's what we say in Bama. Instead of scary, we say scary. Thought scary right there. Aha. Ooh. Dang, where am I at? Can y'all see me? I gotta turn this booger off. Hang on a minute. Can you see me now? Now I can't get out of this screen so I can see you. How are you? There I am. That's right. I've been trying to read. Y'all know it's really hard to read a book and the comments at the same time because it's like double time. I don't know what I'm doing. How long have I been begging you guys? I don't even know how long I've been on here for. Oh. Let's see. 3:22. I started a little bit before 3. They're going, I know, right? They got a hell of a light bill, Sherry says. I love it. It's so funny. I saw your comment. Thought that old drog man woman thing was going to do something to scare you. I think that's probably the caretaker making sure the spooks aren't running too amok around the place. What do you guys think? Let's see, when did I start? Okay, last week I started, or the last time I started at 3. That's why I'm thinking I've only been on here 20 minutes because, okay, I started at 2:25, something like that. So I guess I've been on here about an hour. But 9:23 in the UK. Yep. It's about Betty Bye time for you, Helen. It's about Betty Bye. So I think I'm fixing to get off here for the day. Yeah, I had tried to upload a Vincent Price movie for you guys. YouTube said, nope, you can't play that one. I was like, darn. So 4:23 there. Yes, 3:23, 3:24 here in Bama. So yeah, I'm gonna work on getting that movie posted. So we're gonna still have movie night, and I'm gonna work on trying to get you Patreons and channel members something a little extra from the dam. Sherry, oh my God, you're so funny. Kyle, she said, there goes my bats and my belfry. Sherry's a hoot. And you get her in there on the live stream on Saturday nights and we're watching the movie. She says the funniest things. It wouldn't do good for me and Sherry to hang out, especially with my sister. We would have to have diapers because we'd be peeing our pants nonstop. We'd be laughing so hard. That would be a sight. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm not sure what I'll film this weekend. I guess it just depends on who I can get to go out with me. But I really am wanting to do some more nighttime video with you. You. For you. She is fun, Mary. You're fun too. Mary's been on here forever. She's one of our great part of our family, along with everybody else. So I appreciate each and every one of you. Maybe we can have some more fun come out soon. A lot of depends. It depends on if we have depends. The way it's going right now. And the Alabama governor came out today and said, as of 5 p.m. tomorrow night, everybody has to wear a mask, or you'll be charged $500 fine, or have to do jail time. How they're going to control that, I don't know. Because I went to Huntsville last Friday, and they had that rule there. And for that particular town, nobody's wearing masks. There was a few, but nah, they weren't wearing masks. And nobody saying nothing to them. It'd be too hard to police that. Yes, I'd love to come to the UK, Helen. I would love it. It's probably going to be a long time because I have to pay off some bills before I can try to save money to do that. Because it is a lot of money to go overseas. But, oh, I want to so bad. And hopefully all this will be over. When I do have the money saved up, I can think of all these places over there I want to go film and do videos. Oh my gosh, I'd love it. That would be a dream come true. And hopefully maybe I can do some more traveling in the US once some of this stuff gets better. I hope. But I'm going to say goodbye to you guys, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. This is hump day. So we're halfway through our week. We're going to make it, guys. And somebody went live. Oh, my God, no, get off there. Oh, my word, I just went all over the place. Am I back now? Okay. Love you guys. Big hugs for me. Shorty, where are you? Where are you, Shorty? I was going to let him hug you, but he must be asleep somewhere. But I will see you guys later. Thanks for being here, guys. I love each and every one of you. Take care. I will talk to you soon. Talk to you Saturday night in the broadcast. Bye bye.